The spaceship Orion's Echo descended slowly toward the surface of Zira, a planet that glimmered like a jewel in the vastness of space. Its forests were made of crystal-like trees that sparkled under twin suns, and its skies shimmered with colors no human eye had ever seen before. The crew inside the ship was tense but excited. They had traveled far from Earth to meet the Zirans, an alien species known for their advanced technology and mysterious ways. Among the crew was Ethan Cole, a man who stood out not because of his height or strength, but because he seemed almost invisible next to the others. Ethan wasn't tall and he wasn't muscular. He was barely 5'5", with thin arms and a quiet demeanor. In a room full of soldiers, scientists, and diplomats, he often went unnoticed. But Ethan didn't mind. He knew his value lay elsewhere. As the ship's linguist, his job was to understand languages, even those spoken by beings from other worlds. While the rest of the team focused on weapons, treaties, and survival gear, Ethan carried only a small notebook filled with scribbled notes and sketches of alien symbols. As the landing ramp lowered, the crew stepped out into the strange, new world. The air smelled faintly sweet, like flowers mixed with something metallic. Around them, the towering crystalline trees swayed gently, though there was no wind. Standing at the edge of a clearing were the Zirans, their bodies sleek and reflective as if made of liquid silver. Their eyes glowed faintly and their movements were slow and deliberate, exuding both power and grace. Captain Laura Hayes took charge immediately. She raised her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "We come in friendship," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Behind her, Lieutenant Ryan Blake adjusted his weapon, his fingers lingering on the trigger. Blake was a big man, broad-shouldered and brash, and he believed showing strength was more important than talking. Next to him, Dr. Olivia Grant clutched her scanner tightly, her sharp eyes scanning the aliens for any sign of threat. But it was Ethan who caught everyone's attention. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, leaving the safety of the group. His heart raced, but he kept his expression calm. He looked at the nearest Ziran, studying its face, its posture, the way its glowing eyes flickered slightly. Then, to everyone's shock, Ethan began speaking. Not in English, but in a series of low, melodic tones that matched the rhythm of the Ziran's own speech. The Zirans froze. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then one of them tilted, its head, its metallic surface rippling like water. It responded in kind, its voice deep and resonant. Ethan listened carefully, nodding once before replying. The exchange continued, each sentence flowing seamlessly into the next. The rest of the crew stared in disbelief. How could Ethan possibly know their language? No one had taught him. No recordings existed. Yet here he was, conversing effortlessly with creatures from another world. When the conversation ended, Ethan turned back to the group. His face was pale, but his eyes gleamed with excitement. "They're willing to talk," he said simply. Before anyone could ask how he'd managed such a feat, one of the Zirans moved closer. It was taller than the others, its form shimmering, with an intensity that made it seem almost regal. This had to be their leader. It studied Ethan for a long moment, then spoke in a tone so rich and commanding that it sent shivers down everyone's spines. "This one," the Ziran said, pointing directly at Ethan, "is dangerous." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Dangerous? Ethan? The smallest, quietest person in the room? Blake snorted, clearly skeptical. "Dangerous? Him?" he muttered under his breath. But the Ziran didn't elaborate. Instead, it gestured for the humans to follow, turning and leading them deeper into the forest. As they walked, Ethan stayed close to the front, listening intently to every sound the Zirans made. He noticed how their steps created faint vibrations in the ground, how their glowing eyes dimmed slightly when they paused, as if conserving energy. These details fascinated him. To Ethan, language wasn't just about words. It was about understanding, context, reading body language, and piecing together patterns. And right now, everything he observed told him the Zirans were cautious but not hostile. Back at the temporary base camp later that evening, the crew buzzed with questions. "How did you do it, Ethan?" Olivia asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. I mean, none of us have ever heard that language before. Ethan shrugged, flipping through his notebook. It's not just about the words, he explained. It's about finding connections, patterns. Everything has a logic to it if you look hard enough. Blake wasn't satisfied. So what? You figured out their gibberish in 5 minutes? That doesn't make you special. Ethan met Blake's glare without flinching. Maybe not, he said softly, but it might make me useful. That night, as the rest of the crew settled into their bunks, Ethan wandered outside the camp perimeter. The crystalline trees cast eerie shadows in the dim light, and the air felt cool against his skin. He didn't know why he felt drawn to this place, but something about Jira called to him. As he stood there, lost in thought, a lone Jiran appeared from the darkness. It wasn't one of the leaders. It was smaller, its surface less polished, almost rough. A sentinel, perhaps, tasked with watching over the area. Ethan didn't move. Instead, he greeted the creature in its own language, his voice soft but clear. The Jiran hesitated, then replied. They spoke for several minutes, their voices blending with the hum of the forest around them. Before disappearing back into the shadows, the Jiran uttered a single phrase that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Beware those who seek power through force. Ethan returned to camp quietly, his mind racing. He didn't share the warning with the others, not yet. Something told him the message was meant for him alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan knew one thing for certain. Being the smallest in the room didn't mean he was powerless. Sometimes it gave him a perspective no one else could see. And that, he realized, might just be the most dangerous thing of all. The next morning, the atmosphere at the camp was tense. The crew gathered around a makeshift table discussing the events of the previous day. Captain Laura Hayes stood at the head, her expression serious. We need to figure out why they singled Ethan out, she said, glancing at him briefly before addressing the group. And we need to understand what they want from us. Ethan sat quietly, his notebook open in front of him. He didn't look up as the others debated. Lieutenant Ryan Blake leaned forward, his arms crossed over his chest. I don't trust them, he said bluntly. They're hiding something. We should push harder, show them we're not afraid. Dr. Olivia Grant frowned. That's exactly the wrong move, Ryan. These creatures are advanced. If we provoke them, we could lose everything, including our lives. Blake rolled his eyes. You always think diplomacy is the answer. Sometimes you have to flex your muscles to get respect. Ethan finally looked up, his voice calm but firm. Respect isn't earned by showing force. It's earned by understanding and earning trust. His words hung in the air, drawing stares from the group. Blake scoffed, shaking his head, but Laura nodded thoughtfully. You're right, Ethan, she said. But we still need more information. What did you learn from them yesterday? Ethan hesitated, flipping through his notes. They're cautious. They've dealt with other species before, some hostile. They value intelligence and patience and... He paused, choosing his words carefully. They see potential in us, but they also see risk. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Humanity had a history of conflict, both among themselves and with others. To the Jirans, humans might seem unpredictable, even dangerous. Yet here they were, offering a chance to build something meaningful. Later that afternoon, Ethan accompanied Laura and Olivia to another meeting with the Jirans. Blake stayed behind, grumbling about wasting time on talking instead of acting. As they approached the designated meeting area, a large clearing surrounded by towering crystalline trees, Ethan felt a strange sense of anticipation. This time, Virktal, the leader of the Jirans, was waiting for them. Virktal's presence was commanding, its reflective surface catching the light in mesmerizing patterns. It greeted them with a low hum, then turned its glowing eyes directly on Ethan. You see beyond words, it said, its deep voice resonating in the air. Few possess such insight. Ethan blinked, surprised. I'm just trying to understand, he replied honestly. Your people are different, but I believe we can find common ground. Verktal tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. Then it gestured for Ethan to follow. Laura started to protest, but Ethan shook his head. It's okay, he said softly. I'll be fine. As Ethan walked alongside Verktal, the rest of the group watched anxiously. Olivia whispered to Laura, Do you think this is wise? Laura sighed. Probably not, but Ethan has a way of making things work. Let's trust him. For now. Away from the others, Ethan found himself in a quieter part of the forest. The hum of the crystals seemed louder here, almost musical. Verktal stopped near a cluster of glowing plants and turned to face him. Your kind seeks knowledge, it said. But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand. That's why I'm here. To listen, to learn. Not just for myself, but for my people. Verktal studied him for a long moment, its glowing eyes flickering faintly. Then it reached out, its hand-like appendage hovering near Ethan's chest. Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he felt a strange warmth spread through him, as if the alien was searching for something deeper than words or actions. After a moment, Verktal withdrew, nodding slightly. You carry burdens, it said. Yet you do not let them weigh you down. This is rare. Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. He simply said, Everyone carries burdens. It's what we do with them that matters. When they returned to the clearing, the mood had shifted. The Zirans seemed more relaxed, their movements less rigid. Verktal addressed the group, speaking slowly so Ethan could translate. We will share knowledge, it said, but only if trust is proven. Back at camp that evening, tensions flared again. Blake had grown increasingly frustrated with the slow progress. This is ridiculous, he snapped during dinner. We're wasting time bowing and scraping to these aliens. Why don't we just take what we need? Olivia slammed her cup down on the table. Because we're guests here, Ryan. Guests who could easily be kicked out or worse if we step out of line. Blake sneered. And what do you suggest we do? Sit around and wait for them to hand us scraps? Before Olivia could reply, Ethan spoke up. Force won't work here. You saw how they reacted when we first arrived. They're powerful, Ryan, stronger than we realize. If we push too hard, we'll lose everything. Blake glared at him. And you think sweet-talking them is the answer? You're just a linguist. Ethan, don't pretend you know better than those of us trained for combat. Ethan met his gaze steadily. I never claimed to know better. I'm just saying we need to play this smart. Rushing in blindly won't help anyone. The argument ended abruptly when Laura stepped in. Enough, she said sharply. We're a team, whether we like it or not. Blake, stand down. Ethan, keep doing what you're doing. We'll decide our next steps tomorrow. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat outside the camp, staring up at the alien sky. The stars here were different, brighter, closer, almost alive. He thought about what Verktal had said, about carrying burdens and proving trust. He wondered if the Zirans truly understood humans, or if they saw them as children playing with fire. A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. Turning, he saw Olivia approaching. She sat down beside him, wrapping her jacket tighter around herself. Can't sleep either, she asked. Ethan shook his head. Too much on my mind. Olivia sighed. You're handling all of this well. Better than most of us, honestly. How do you stay so calm? Ethan smiled faintly. I'm not always calm, I just focus on what I can control. Words, connections, small steps. That's all any of us can do. Olivia nodded, her expression thoughtful. You know, Ryan might act tough, but he's scared. We all are. This place, it's overwhelming. I know, Ethan said quietly. But fear doesn't have to control us. We can use it to remind ourselves why we're here. To make things better, not worse. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. Eventually, Olivia stood and patted Ethan on the shoulder. "Get some rest, okay? We'll need you tomorrow." As she walked away, Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes. He didn't feel tired anymore. Instead, he felt a quiet determination settling over him. The road ahead would be difficult, maybe even dangerous. But he knew one thing for certain. Being the smallest in the room didn't mean he was powerless. Sometimes, the smallest moves made the biggest difference, and if anyone doubted that, they'd soon learn otherwise. The days passed quickly, each one bringing new challenges and discoveries. Ethan spent most of his time with the Zirans, learning their customs and deepening his understanding of their language. He noticed subtleties that others might miss. The way their glowing eyes dimmed slightly when they were uncertain, how their reflective surfaces shimmered faster when they were agitated. These details helped him navigate conversations and build trust. Back at the camp, tensions continued to simmer. Lieutenant Ryan Blake grew increasingly impatient, convinced that diplomacy was a waste of time. "We're sitting ducks out here," he muttered during a briefing. "They could wipe us out whenever they want. Why are we still playing nice?" Captain Laura Hayes shot him a sharp look. "Because violence isn't the answer, Ryan. We're here to negotiate, not start a war." Blake clenched his fists but said nothing. Instead, he turned his frustration inward, pacing the perimeter of the camp late into the night. Ethan watched him from a distance, sensing the anger boiling beneath the surface. He knew Blake wasn't entirely wrong. There was risk in relying solely on words, but he also knew that rushing into action without understanding could lead to disaster. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows, across the crystalline forest, Ethan received an urgent message from Virktal. The Ziran leader requested his presence immediately. Leaving the camp behind, Ethan followed the glowing path through the trees until he reached a secluded clearing. There, Virktal waited, flanked by 2 sentinels. "Trouble comes," Virktal said without preamble, its voice low and grave. "Your people break trust." Ethan's heart sank. What happened? Virktal explained that a group of humans had entered a restricted area earlier that day, ignoring warnings and damaging sacred structures. The Zirans viewed this as a direct violation of their agreement. Ethan listened carefully, his mind racing. He hadn't been part of the excursion and had no idea who was responsible, but he understood the gravity of the situation. "I'll fix this," Ethan promised. "Give me time to find out what happened." Virktal studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You have until sunrise. Fail, and consequences will follow." Returning to the camp, Ethan found chaos unfolding. Several crew members had returned injured, their faces pale and their voices trembling as they recounted their ordeal. According to them, Blake had led a small team into a forbidden zone, claiming it was a routine exploration mission. When the Zirans confronted them, things escalated quickly. Weapons were drawn, and though no shots were fired, the damage had been done. Ethan confronted Blake immediately, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained fury. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Blake crossed his arms, unrepentant. "I was doing my job, Ethan. Someone has to protect us. If those aliens think they can push us around, they've got another thing coming." "You don't understand," Ethan snapped. "This isn't about pushing back, this is about survival. They gave us a chance to prove ourselves, and you threw it away." Before Blake could respond, Laura stepped in, her voice cutting through the tension. "Enough. Both of you. Blake, what happened today was reckless and unnecessary. You put everyone at risk. Ethan, go talk to the Zirans. See if you can salvage this mess." Ethan didn't waste time arguing further. With a heavy heart, he returned to the clearing where Virktal awaited him. The alien leader stood motionless, its glowing eyes fixed on Ethan as he approached. "Speak," it commanded. Taking a deep breath, Ethan began. "What happened today was wrong. I take full responsibility for my people's actions. But please understand, it doesn't reflect our intentions. We came here seeking peace, not conflict." Virktal tilted its head, considering his words. Responsibility is meaningless without action. How will you make this right? Ethan hesitated, knowing the weight of the decision ahead. Finally, he spoke. Let me face judgment. Hold me accountable for their mistakes. In return, spare the rest of my team. The sentinels shifted slightly, their movements rippling like water. Verktal remained silent for a long moment before replying. Courage is rare among your kind. Very well. You will accompany us to the Citadel. Your fate will be decided there. News of Ethan's offer spread quickly through the camp. Some accused him of being foolish, while others praised his bravery. Blake refused to apologize, insisting that Ethan had overstepped his role. But Laura and Olivia both expressed gratitude, recognizing the sacrifice he was making. As Ethan prepared to leave with the Zirans, Olivia pulled him aside. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice tinged with worry. You don't owe them anything. Ethan smiled faintly. Yes, I do. To them, and to us. If I can prevent a war, it's worth it. The journey to the Citadel was long and surreal. The structure loomed ahead, its crystalline spires reaching toward the sky like frozen lightning. Inside, the air hummed with energy and the walls seemed to pulse with light. Ethan felt small and insignificant, yet strangely calm. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. At the heart of the Citadel, Ethan underwent a series of trials, designed to test his character. Each challenge forced him to confront difficult truths about himself and his species. In one trial, he was shown visions of Earth's history, wars, destruction, greed, all played out in vivid detail. The images were painful to watch, but Ethan didn't look away. He acknowledged the flaws of humanity, promising to strive for something better. In another trial, he faced a moral dilemma: save a single human prisoner or prevent an environmental collapse threatening the entire planet. Without hesitation, Ethan chose the latter. If I fail my people today, he explained, I can still save countless lives tomorrow. His decisions earned him the respect of the Zirans. By the end of the trials, Verktal declared him an honorary member of their council. You see beyond yourself, the leader said. This is rare and valuable. Word of Ethan's success reached the human camp, sparking relief and admiration. Even Blake admitted grudgingly, maybe he's not as useless as I thought. When Ethan finally returned, he brought with him a fragile but hopeful alliance. The Zirans agreed to share limited technology in exchange for promises of mutual cooperation and respect. As the crew prepared to depart Zira, Ethan stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the crystalline trees sway gently in the breeze. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust took time to build, and mistakes would happen. But for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of hope. Humanity had been given a second chance, a chance to grow, to learn, and to become something greater than it had ever been. As the Orion's echo lifted off, Ethan looked out the viewport at the shimmering planet below. Though physically small, he had accomplished what no other human could, bridging two vastly different species and laying the groundwork for a brighter future. And every alien who crossed his path knew exactly why they didn't mess with him. The journey back to Earth aboard the Orion's Echo was quieter than usual. The crew moved through their tasks with a mix of relief and unease, knowing they had narrowly avoided disaster on Zira. Ethan Cole spent much of his time alone, either staring out the viewport at the endless expanse of space or scribbling notes in his worn notebook. Though he had succeeded in repairing the fragile alliance with the Zirans, the weight of what had happened still lingered in his mind. Lieutenant Ryan Blake avoided Ethan for the most part, though his resentment simmered beneath the surface. He couldn't understand why someone like Ethan, small, unassuming, and not even part of the military, had been chosen to represent humanity during the trials. To Blake, it felt like a slap in the face, but even he couldn't deny that Ethan's actions had saved them all from potential catastrophe. Captain Laura Hayes called a meeting midway through the voyage to discuss the next steps once they returned to Earth. This mission changes everything, she began, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. We've been given access to Ziran technology, but it comes with strict conditions. If we break those rules, we risk losing their trust completely. Dr. Olivia Grant nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's going to take time for people back home to adjust. Some will see this as an opportunity. Others might try to exploit it. We need to be careful. Ethan listened quietly, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. He knew better than anyone how delicate this situation was. The Zirans weren't just advanced, they were cautious, wary of outsiders who might misuse their knowledge. They had seen civilizations rise and fall because of greed and arrogance. Humanity would have to prove itself worthy every single day moving forward. Blake finally spoke up, his tone gruff. So what? Are we supposed to sit around and wait for them to give us scraps? This isn't just about peace, it's about survival. If we don't stay ahead, someone else will. Laura sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Ryan, I get it. You want to protect us, but pushing too hard could undo everything Ethan worked for. Trust is earned slowly, and it can disappear in an instant. Ethan glanced at Blake, his expression calm. It's not about waiting for scraps. It's about building something real, something lasting. That takes patience and humility. Blake rolled his eyes but didn't argue further. For now at least, the tension between them remained under control. When the Orion's Echo touched down on Earth weeks later, the crew was greeted by a flurry of activity. Reporters swarmed the landing site, shouting questions about the mission and the mysterious Zirans. Government officials arrived shortly after, eager to debrief the team and learn more about the agreement they had secured. Ethan found himself thrust into the spotlight, something he hadn't anticipated or particularly wanted. During one press conference, a journalist asked Ethan directly, "How did you manage to gain the trust of the Zirans when so many others failed?" Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I didn't do anything special, I just listened. I tried to understand their perspective instead of forcing mine onto them. Sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference." His answer drew murmurs of approval from the crowd, but Blake stood off to the side, scowling. To him, Ethan's response sounded overly simplistic, almost naive. Yet even Blake couldn't deny that Ethan's approach had worked where brute force and intimidation had failed. As days turned into weeks, the reality of the alliance began to sink in. Scientists pored over the data provided by the Zirans, marveling at their advancements in energy, medicine, and environmental restoration. But with each breakthrough came new challenges. Politicians argued over how to distribute the benefits fairly while corporations lobbied for exclusive access to the technology. Tensions rose quickly, threatening to undermine the progress that had been made. Ethan threw himself into the effort, working tirelessly to ensure the agreement was honored. He traveled across the globe, meeting with leaders, scientists, and activists to explain the importance of cooperation. His quiet determination inspired many, earning him both allies and enemies along the way. Some accused him of being too idealistic, while others praised him for his vision of a better future. One evening, after a particularly grueling round of negotiations, Ethan found himself sitting alone in a park near the United Nations headquarters. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but his thoughts were far away. Back on Zira, among the crystalline trees and shimmering skies. He wondered if the Zirans truly believed humanity could change, or if they saw them as a gamble worth taking. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan looked up to see Olivia standing there holding 2 cups of coffee. He smiled faintly and gestured for her to sit. "Thanks," he said, accepting one of the cups. Olivia sipped her drink, gazing at the skyline. "You've done incredible work, Ethan. People are starting to listen, but it's not going to be easy." "I know," Ethan replied. "Change never is, but we have to keep trying. Even if it feels like we're fighting against the tide," Oliva nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder if it's enough, all the talking, negotiating, explaining? Will it really make a difference in the end?" Ethan paused, considering the question. "Maybe not right away, but every step counts. Every conversation matters. If we stop trying, then we've already lost." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars peek through the haze of city lights. Finally, Olivia spoke again. You know, Ryan still doesn't get it. He thinks strength is about power and dominance. But seeing you stand up to the Zirans, that took real courage. Ethan chuckled softly. Courage isn't about being the strongest or the loudest. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when you're scared. Olivia smiled. Well, whatever it is, it's working. Keep going, Ethan. The world needs more people like you. As months passed, the impact of Ethan's efforts became clearer. Slowly, but surely humanity began to adapt to its new relationship with the Zirans. Conflicts arose, of course. There were always those who sought to exploit the alliance for personal gain. But Ethan remained steadfast, reminding everyone of the stakes involved. One day, as he prepared for another round of meetings, Ethan received an unexpected message. It was from Virktal, transmitted via the communication device gifted by the Zirans. The message was brief but meaningful. Your actions ripple beyond your world. Continue to lead with wisdom. Ethan stared at the glowing screen for a long moment, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Being the smallest in the room had never mattered to him. What mattered was the impact he could have, the lives he could touch, the bridges he could build. And as long as he kept moving forward, no one would ever doubt his strength again. The months following the Orion's Echo's return to Earth were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan Cole found himself at the center of it all, traveling from one corner of the globe to another. His days were filled with meetings, speeches, and negotiations, as he worked tirelessly to ensure humanity upheld its end of the agreement with the Zirans. Though he never sought recognition, his name became synonymous with the Alliance, a symbol of hope for some and frustration for others. Not everyone embraced the partnership with open arms. Corporations lobbied fiercely for exclusive access to Ziran technology, arguing that it could revolutionize industries and boost economies. Politicians debated endlessly about how to distribute the benefits fairly, while activists warned against repeating humanity's past mistakes. The pressure mounted and tensions threatened to boil over at every turn. Ethan navigated these challenges with quiet determination. He listened to opposing viewpoints, seeking common ground where none seemed to exist. When powerful figures tried to sway him with promises of wealth or influence, he remained steadfast. This isn't about profit, he would say. It's about survival and doing what's right. Despite the chaos, progress was being made. Scientists collaborated with Ziran experts to develop sustainable energy solutions, curing diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Environmental restoration projects began reversing decades of damage, breathing new life into dying ecosystems. Slowly but surely the world started to change, for the better. Yet not everyone was pleased. Lieutenant Ryan Blake, now stationed at a military base, grew increasingly disillusioned. To him, the alliance felt like a surrender rather than a victory. He resented Ethan's role in shaping the agreement, convinced that humanity should have taken a firmer stance. "We're rolling over for them," he muttered during a training exercise. "Mark my words, this will come back to bite us." His commanding officer, aware of Blake's frustrations, pulled him aside one evening. "You don't like Ethan?" "Cold, do you?" she asked bluntly. Blake hesitated, then shrugged. "It's not personal. I just think we should be focusing on strength, not handouts." The officer studied him for a moment before replying. "Strength isn't always about force, Ryan. Sometimes it's about knowing when to step back and when to trust someone else to lead." Blake didn't respond, but her words lingered in his mind long after their conversation ended. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan received an invitation from the United Nations to address a global summit. Leaders from around the world had gathered to discuss the future of humanity's relationship with the Zirans. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes watched him intently, waiting to hear what he had to say. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. "When we first arrived on Zira," he began, his voice calm but firm, "we were strangers in a strange land. We came seeking knowledge, but what we found was something far greater. an opportunity to grow, not just as individuals but as a species. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Zirans gave us a chance to prove ourselves. They didn't have to. They could have turned us away, or worse. But they chose to trust us. And now, it's our responsibility to honor that trust. Ethan went on to outline the challenges ahead, ensuring equitable distribution of resources, preventing exploitation, and fostering mutual respect between humans and Zirans. His message was clear. The alliance wasn't just about technology, it was about building a foundation for a brighter future. As he concluded his speech, the audience erupted into applause. Some stood, cheering loudly, while others simply nodded, in agreement. Among them was Olivia Grant, who smiled proudly from her seat near the front. She knew how much effort Ethan had poured into this moment, and how much rested on his shoulders moving forward. Afterward, as Ethan mingled with delegates and dignitaries, he spotted Blake standing off to the side. Their eyes met briefly, and, though neither said a word, there was a flicker of understanding between them, a shared acknowledgement of the stakes involved. Weeks later, Ethan returned to the research facility where much of the collaboration with the Zirans took place. The air buzzed with excitement as scientists tested prototypes and analyzed data. Despite the occasional setback, morale remained high. People believed in the mission, inspired by the possibilities it represented. Late one night, as Ethan reviewed reports in his office, a soft knock sounded at the door. He glanced up to see Verktal standing there, its shimmering form casting faint reflections on the walls. "You called for me?" Ethan asked, rising to his feet. Verktal nodded. "Your people have made progress. This pleases us." Ethan smiled faintly. "We're trying. It's not perfect, but we're learning." The alien leader tilted its head, studying him closely. "Learning is the first step toward growth. You have shown great courage, Ethan Cole. Few would have dared to stand between two worlds as you have." Ethan shook his head modestly. "I'm just one person. None of this would be possible without everyone working together." Verktal hummed softly, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. "Perhaps. But leaders are defined not by their size or strength, but by their ability to inspire others. You have done this." Before leaving, Verktal handed Ethan a small device, its surface smooth and cool to the touch. "This is a gift," it explained, "a reminder of the bond between our peoples. Use it wisely." Ethan accepted the device, bowing his head in gratitude. As Verktal departed, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would still be difficult, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But he knew that as long as he stayed true to his principles, humanity had a fighting chance. Years passed, and the alliance between humans and Zirans grew stronger. Breakthroughs in science and technology transformed lives, while lessons in cooperation and humility reshaped societies. Ethan continued to play a key role, guiding humanity through the complexities of interstellar diplomacy. Though he aged, his resolve never wavered. One evening, as he sat on a hill overlooking a restored forest, Ethan reflected on everything that had happened. The journey had been long and often grueling, but it had also been worth it. Humanity hadn't solved all its problems, it likely never would, but it had taken significant steps toward becoming something greater. Behind him, a young girl approached cautiously. She held a sketchbook in her hands, her expression curious. "Are you Ethan Cole?" she asked timidly. Ethan smiled warmly. "Yes, I am." "What's your name?" "Lila," she replied, holding out her sketchbook. Inside were drawings of crystalline, trees, and shimmering aliens. "I want to visit Zira someday, like you did." Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe you will. Just remember, one day you might find yourself in a position to make a difference. When that happens, don't let fear hold you back. Trust yourself and trust others." Lila nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. As she ran off, Ethan gazed at the stars above, feeling a quiet pride. Being the smallest in the room had never mattered to him. What mattered was the impact he had made, and the legacy he would leave behind. And every alien who crossed his path knew exactly why they didn't mess with him.